Now, where was I just now? Okay, least affordable. Okay, this is the reason why Hong Kong, yeah? Why Hong Kong? Hong Kong's housing affordability is tied to its land regulation. It's because of the very tight or very strict apa nama tu, land development law about high land development. So hilly areas lah, or high slope areas. A student did study on this, PhD. His PhD was on apa nama tu, on land, high land development. So he did Hong Kong as a case study. Found that there are how many? Dozens of regulations, so that must be read together when people want to develop in Hong Kong, especially in highlands. Okay, anyway, so average housing cost as a percentage of net monthly income. Okay, so it says here lower average incomes make housing relatively less affordable in emerging economies. Okay, logically, and this is the Bloomberg Global City Housing Affordability Index. So this by this photo or this picture is produced by Bloomberg. Now we can see here that the most unaffordable, okay, when compared to percentage, when we compare the housing costs as a percentage, when we express the average housing cost as a percentage of net monthly income. So housing cost here can be both the mortgage plus maintenance, management, service charge, whatever, as a percentage of the net monthly income, or the rental, just now the rents, plus all the costs associated with housing. Okay, normally for rental you don't have to pay maintenance, management, and service charge is borne by the owner only, but expressed as a percentage of the net monthly income. So the most unaffordable is Caracas. So see here the amount that they have to pay as a percentage of their net monthly income is 3,000%. That doesn't make any, it's mind-blowing. 3,000. What does that tell you? It's something that they cannot afford. 3,000 times, it's more than what they earn every month, right? Okay. So in Caracas, that's why this refers to the conventional housing. So that's why most of them choose to live in informal settlements, slums, slum areas. So you have 200 to 300% in Hanoi, Mumbai, Bogota, Buenos Aires, Rio de Janeiro. So most 1, 2, 3 are in the South America. Now, good thing from this photo that we can find here is this one. Affordability squeeze in China has eased. So means there's some good news there. Housing has become more affordable in China, at least. In US, Canadian cities, some of the most affordable housing are also located there. But see here, states here that Latin American cities are less affordable than 5 years ago. So housing affordability is so bad in this part of the world, the South America. Okay, issue number 3, slums. So it has a continuation from the previous issues, right? UN Habitat estimated that by 2030, there will be an increase of the world population by 1.18 billion, and currently 880 million people are living in inadequate housing in cities. Inadequate means this one lah, housing that is not that is below the average standard of living. Inadequate. Therefore, by 2030, there will be a housing deficit of approximately 2 billion units. Okay, 2 billion units. So we have a problem of urbanization without housing. It's when the city expansion, in terms of increased population in the city, is not joined, or is not not joined, or tidak disertai, not joined with increase in housing supply. urbanization without housing. With high housing costs, low-income groups have no choice but to live in alternative housing or risk being homeless. So what other choice do they have? They don't want to be homeless, so the only choice that they have is alternative housing, this one. Okay, living in the slum areas, in favelas, in apa nama tu? In is it Venezuela? Favelas? Dia punya kampung setinggan kat sana, favelas, alternative housing. The trend of urbanization causes a need for urban housing that is affordable, or slums will form. So if this, the what you call normally the intervention from the government, the private sector will not come in and voluntarily provide housing for low-income people because it's simply unprofitable. And we know that developers are profit motivated. That is their main motivation when they do their business. The profit motivation of developers has been extensively written on in Malaysia by Prof. Agus Salim, by Diskoya Chato, this researcher on the behavior of developers. They all say that the main motivation for developers is profit. Okay, so if you want to know more, if you want to read more about slums, this is optional reading actually. Okay, you can read this Planet of Slums. Okay, that is on your spectrum. Now, financialization of housing, financialization. Okay, financialization is a concept that arises due to this commodification of housing. Okay? So in the 1980s, financial deregulations freed up housing for globalization as new financial instruments were created. Okay? So housing was not a localized industry anymore, a localized activity anymore, economic activity. It now becomes international, global, because an investor in the UK, for instance, can go into Australia to develop, to do a joint venture with a local partner or something like that. And many types of financial instruments were created then. Okay, in the 1980s. This is Margaret Thatcher's era ni. Margaret Thatcher, the privatization, the market approach or market-led economy. Because of this financial deregulation, no more control on the bank. So once they lifted control on the banks, whereby the banks are able to distribute money or to give money to many kinds of activities. This one, housing is one of the activities that enjoys the deregulation of the financial sector. Housing became rapidly commodified together with other real estate. Okay? And real estate forms 60% of global assets at $207 trillion US dollars. Oh, wow. Okay? 70% of which is housing. Okay? A lot from 70%. Okay? Three-fourths. Money poured into housing is not translated into significantly more supply but ultra high-end units. But the thing is, the financial deregulation that freed up money was not equivalent to more units being built, but more units as in more units, more affordable units, but it led to more high-end units to be built. Again, urbanization without housing. Okay, so then we have the UN Habitat coming in, setting the global housing goals due to all these issues that I stated above. Okay, so we have the first one, integrated housing framework. It says that integrated housing framework, embedding housing into urban plans and investment strategies as they relate to urban services, land use, transportation, and environmental sustainability, to improve livability and accessibility within urban areas, to avoid the poor living conditions in urban areas now, the slum areas, low income low income housing that sometimes do not have transportation going to the city. So now they say it must integrate the housing framework. Sometimes the government does build low income flats or low income apartments, but sometimes there's no transportation from, or it can be located at the town city fringe, at the suburban area, city fringe, whereby there's no road network to bring the low income people to the city where their occupation is. They work in the city, but there's no transport, so that creates problem to them. Okay? They have housing, they have affordable housing, but then they have to fork out, they have to incur more transportation costs. So at the end of the day, it will reduce their quality of living. Inclusive housing, the commitment to support participatory processes, fair housing policies, and to address housing for special needs groups. So it's more now inclusive, whereby, like I said, slowly in other countries, they subgroup. They create subgroups within housing category. Say the low income group just now, but low income group within that category, you have different subgroups. Affordable housing, the adoption of policies and measures to improve affordability of home ownership. Okay, subsidy policies to enable low-income households to rent or own adequate housing, revenue and capital-generating policies, and mechanisms that limit property speculation. So these are some of the policies that can be taken by countries to ensure or to keep their housing affordable. Okay, this one, subsidy policies, this one, in the few slides down, I will discuss about NRES in Australia and NRES. Now, adequate housing, measures that provide for habitability, which is protection from natural elements, hazards and disease, access to basic services, including to water, sanitation, lighting, electricity, and garbage disposal, legal rights to secure tenure, including compliance with a continuum of land rights, promotion of gender equal land rights, and prohibition of housing discrimination and forced eviction. So these are all, or mostly, this part, the legal rights are concerned with land administration just now, the land administration part of housing. Okay, whereby they want to create a security of tenure. Okay, you can buy housing, but without the security of tenure, it means that the house that you buy can be taken away from you anytime, okay, because there's no security of tenure. Oh, that reminds me of a story, but I don't think I have time. Very short one. I attended this talk, okay, sustainability in Taiwan. This one speaker from China, I cannot remember, but okay. The presentation was about the fact that in that particular country, okay, they sell their apartment units that are built illegally on government land. Okay, they are banking on the fact that nobody from the government authorities come and disturb them. But if the government decides to take action, then nobody, they have to leave the apartment complex. But you can imagine, you buy a house, move into your house, live there for 10, 15, 20 years without a title. Okay, what kind of life is that? No security of tenure. Can you sell your property? Yes, that's the good thing about that one, because they use an honor system, whereby the sale and purchase agreement, so-called, the sale and purchase agreement is used as a proof of ownership. But then, under law, there's no right. They have no right to the apartment, because the land that the apartment is built on is not their land. Okay, so that kind of alternative housing we can find in other countries. Okay? Informal settlement upgrading, support of neighborhood upgrade. But is it, sorry, going back to that, sorry. The apartment costs are lower than a normal apartment cost. I think they said more than half. If maybe about 30% cheaper, not 30% cheaper, 70% cheaper, because they only pay about 30% of a normal apartment with a secure title. So they say, do you want to take the risk, okay, but paying for about 30% of a similar apartment somewhere else in the city, but you don't have the security. So it's something that they have to weigh before they buy the unit. Affordable, yes. Secure, no. So informal settlement upgrading, support of neighborhood upgrading programs, and protection of incremental housing. Okay? Informal settlement upgrading, whereby in some areas, okay, this is the thing, slums, okay. Sometimes in some countries, the government provides help to the slum dwellers. They don't chase them out. They just say, okay, we have to make do with what is here. Okay, maybe provide them a better facilities to improve their quality of living. For instance, improve the sanitation of that area. For instance, provide infrastructure such as roads to that area. Because when a large percentage of your population lives in the settlement, in the informal settlement area, the government has no choice. Have to let them to live there, because otherwise they will be homeless, and there's other kinds of issues if the government decides to demolish the settlements. So they say, okay, we have to accept that as a way of life, and we must make sure that these people are comfortable. Okay. So the role of the state in affordable housing provision. So I trace this evolution of the role of the state. State here refers to the country, to the government. The role of the state, not the country, the government. So the role of the government in affordable housing provision. So I trace this one from Arku and Harris. Okay, this is the what you call it, a literature, piece of literature that I read for my PhD 2011. Now, a long time ago, but it's still relevant now, because this paper by Arku and Harris, okay, they trace back what are the attitude of the state from the 1960s up until the 2000s. Okay, so in 1960s, the role of the state is mainly as the direct producer of low-income housing, direct build their own low-cost housing or low-income housing. However, the fact that the government has limited resources meant that the state was unable to meet the demand for affordable housing, which is true in most developing countries. Same in Malaysia. In the 1960s, the rumah kilat, the low-cost housing, all built by the government itself. Okay, but in the 1980s, okay, together with the financial liberalization, the marketization of the economy, whereby they say that the market can be roped in to help with low-income housing provision. Most countries see government disinvestment in public housing and replacement of public housing mechanisms with market-driven systems. So instead of the government providing the housing, they place the burden, they place the responsibility to the market. Okay, the government, they say here, governments play a more facilitative role than the producer. They use the enabling approach. So in Malaysia, the low-cost housing quota was introduced in the early 1980s. Low-cost housing quota. So here, essentially in Malaysia, for developments above a certain quantum, above a certain land area, the developer has to build low-cost housing. That's normally a quota, like 30% or 40% or 20% of the development must be built with low-cost housing. And that is a condition to approve the development. So unless you are prepared to build the low-cost housing, you will not be able to develop the site. So the developers in Malaysia had no choice. Okay, so they had to build the low-cost housing, and it's known as low-cost housing quota. It's a win-win situation. Win in the sense that to the government gets their low-cost housing, but to the developer, it's a win also situation because they get to get the profit from the remainder of the development. Okay, in the 2000s, the emergence of public-private partnerships, PPPs, in affordable housing provision. So in the 2000s, we have what is called the PPP, whereby the government provides land. So, So, okay, one in the 1960s, the government directly builds. 1980s, 1990s, the government forced the market to build, but in the 2000s, the government softened. They softened their stand. Okay, they said partnership lah. So partnership, but we still have low-cost housing quota now. Still have. But on top of the low-cost housing quota, okay, in Malaysia especially, we have PPPs in affordable housing provision, whereby the government provides land and the private sector provides capital, labor, and skills. Okay, so definition of affordable housing. So we are, I think, most familiar with the 30% rule. But anyway, some of the discussion on the definition of affordable housing. Affordability is mainly defined by the relationship between household housing expenditure and income. So housing costs and income, the relative proportion. The household is able to pay for the housing costs, mortgage and outgoings, while having enough balance to pay for other important expenditures, focusing on low and moderate income households. The extent to which there are enough housing units of different costs to provide each household with a unit it can afford. So this is something that is quite missing in the Malaysian definition of affordable housing. Okay, it says here enough housing units of different costs. To provide each household. So because of the fact that we categorize the income levels too broadly, and we didn't do last time we didn't recognize that there are subgroups under each income category. We only say, okay, we have the low income, middle income, high income, but the medium too, now only we divide to two: low, medium, high, medium. Even then, it's not that it's not sufficient. It's not adequate. Actually, we have to. I think, in my opinion, we have to really detail out. We have to do a study on this. Housing is affordable when the down payment is able to be met, and not only that, not only after the down payment is able to be met, the continuous payment on that home after purchase is able to be met. So one is the 10% deposit is able to be met. Or in the case of, okay, which says here about purchase, so it's quite unfair. Everything's talking about the definition in the literature talks about affordability to purchase. It says here down payment for purchase is able to be met. Continuous payment on home after purchase is able to be met. The mortgage lah. So if I replace, okay, this definition with the situation when you want to rent, so this refers to the deposit. Deposit. Okay, normally in Malaysia it's 2 + 1, kan? 2 months deposit plus 1 month rent, the first month's rent. Okay, so 2 + 1. Say your rental is 1,000, so you have to upfront prepare 3,000 ringgit. Okay, the next month you have to prepare enough rental money, which is 1,000. Definition. Okay, the United Nations Human Settlement Program defines affordable housing as homes that meet the quality and location, and home buyers still have the financial capability to buy other basic needs. Okay, so again, my question here is, does housing need to be affordable only for buyers? What about renters? Then adalah this one. I like this definition. It says here, any type of housing, market or non-market provided, that is rented or purchased at a cost that is not beyond the financial capacity of a household. That is better, isn't it? that is rented or purchased at a cost that is not beyond the financial capacity of a household. But quite generic again, the definition. But the better way to tackle affordable housing, rather than defining it, we see that definition is quite, defining affordable housing is quite elusive. It's quite susah lah. It's quite difficult to do. Is just state the measure of affordable housing. It's better like that because it's more objective. The measure of affordable housing. Essentially, there's three measures of affordable housing being used outside. Okay. So from our attempt at defining affordable housing, okay, it says we find that it's quite hard to define, and also it's quite hard to define the measure. But at least you have these three methods that are quite commonly used outside, okay, as a measurement or as an indicator of affordable housing. The first one is median multiple, MM, also known as price income ratio, PIR. Okay, the median house price must not be more than 3 times the annual median household income. Must be median. It cannot be average. Okay, median is when you stack up, when you organize the house price and then you find the middle one. Okay, the middle means the most fair, besides the average. Not the average, because average may be distorted because of the fact that some high-end, the high-end sector, high-end segment is quite high, too high, kan? Low, whereas the low income or low cost housing is fixed the price. What is it now? 70,000. Okay, so it's not fair if you use average. So it must be median. Must not be more than 3 times the annual median. Again, because of the it cannot be average because of potential distortion when you use average. So it must be median. The second measure is housing cost burden, HCB, whereby the housing cost, for example, the mortgage payment must not be more than 30% of household income. The rule of thumb, 30% rule. Housing cost burden. So actually, this is quite common. When I started doing my research in housing, this is what I use for the definition of affordable housing. I started doing research in housing in 2008. Okay, so I only came across this one with median multiple in 2011, something like that. No, 2014. Median multiple. Okay, this is actually better than this one, the housing cost burden. Then finally, we have the residual income, RI. That is the leftover income after non-housing commitments is enough to cover monthly mortgage payment. This is quite rare. We don't use it in Malaysia. Okay, or in most literature, they don't really use this one, but it is out there. Okay, leftover income after non-housing commitments. So example of multiple median. Okay, not example, the key tu, the key maknanya the explanation. Okay, so housing is said to be severely unaffordable when the PIR is 5.1 and over and above. Okay, it's said to be seriously unaffordable. So we have severely, seriously, moderately unaffordable, and affordable. So the affordable is 3 times and under. Okay, 3 times and under. Moderately is 3.1 to 4. Seriously unaffordable, 4.1 to 5. So anything 5.1 and over is severely unaffordable. So again, median house price over median household income. Okay, you can see here example severely this one, severely more than 5.1 and above. Okay, in the US you have all this. The most unaffordable one. Again, Hong Kong, 20.8. So it means that in Hong Kong, the median house price is 20.8 times the median income there. Okay, 20. So that is a reflection of what we saw in the previous slide. Okay, in Malaysia, a few years ago, Malacca was the only state with this one, affordable. Now everyone, not all states are no longer affordable. Semuanya dah atas in Malaysia, kan? Which makes sense lah. Sebenarnya dulu 2014, Melaka was here. Now everyone is above. Semua dah unaffordable. Okay. Alternative definition of affordable housing. Okay, in Australia, the National Affordable Housing Summit Group defined affordable housing as housing that is reasonably adequate in standard and location. One, must have good standards, must have good location. Not a housing that you can buy, but is outside the city, is so far away from the center of employment that you have to incur extra or higher, more housing, more transportation costs to reach your employment place. For lower or middle income households, okay, so for two categories of income, does not cost so much that a household is unlikely to be able to meet other basic needs. It uses the RI just now, RI definition, and must be on a sustainable basis. Sustainable, okay. Then in NRES, I think I have a definition of this below, so I'm not going to discuss NRES now. This patutnya NRAS kan, but all the time when I went to to attend presentations by Australian researchers, they always pronounce it as NRES because of their slang lah. NRES, kita pun tersebut NRES. National Rental Affordability Scheme. Now basically lah, tak apa, I can tell you now. Basically NRES ni is a subsidy, is a rental subsidy, yeah, scheme whereby the government, okay, they ask for tender from the private sector to come in to provide rental accommodation. Okay, specific. It cannot be how many units and below. I think must be blocks lah, not small scale, not 5 units or 10 units, cannot. But the private sector tu must own a building, an apartment building. Okay, they apply to be under the NRES, they will get grants from the government. Grant, maknanya subsidi lah, duit. And the people who want to stay in that apartment block, okay, they pay lower than market rent because of the fact that their landlord now has been subsidized. Okay, so again, I think it's win-win because the government does not have to build, kan? They don't have to allocate such a big amount, okay, to build public housing for the population. And at the same time, the private sector, okay, they can ensure a fixed income for their building or for their apartment block. As an investor, that will be good for them. At least there's a guarantee of 100% occupancy. Okay, and rest. Okay, general affordable housing policy. In most countries, affordable housing policy is often synonymous with low cost or low income housing. The focus used to be on low income households, for instance, urban poor, single parents, the elderly, people with disabilities. Okay, however, more attention has now been given to other groups. So we have the sandwich class. Sandwich class is the middle income group, the people who only who is between low income and high income people. Now, low income will get housing assistance from the government. The high income people, they don't need any assistance because they have money. So this sandwich class or sandwich group, they are in between. They are neither are eligible for government assistance, or and at the same time they cannot afford because of the fact that their income is fixed, that is in the middle. Young people, okay, people who just graduated, for instance, nowadays. This has to do with intergenerational equity. So okay, it's like this. This the generation of the young people, they have started to question, okay, why can't we buy houses now? when our parents at our age, okay, they can afford to buy. It's not fair for us. Our parents could enter into home ownership at our age, when they were at our age now. Okay, so this leads to a feeling of inequity to unfairness. So they speak out, they voice out their frustration, okay, and the government has picked up on these young people, because these young people sometimes they want to buy, they can afford to buy, they want to buy but they cannot afford to buy because of the fact that the income is not matched with the house price. If we see the income increment, the income increment trends in Malaysia, for instance, the increase in income for the young people, okay, over the last 20-30 years is well below the increase in the house price. Okay, so they can afford with their salary. Now, generally, government policies are concerned with the provision and distribution of affordable housing, mostly for purchase, but increasingly for rent. Okay, this is true, especially in Malaysia, because of the fact that the latest national housing policy, okay, for the first time, it has expressly indicated for housing for rent. Last time was like hinting, the national housing policy #1 only hints on the tenure diversity, but the NHP2 is quite clear. They support rental housing. Policies for affordable housing. Okay, now we come to SDG 11.1. Okay, what is it? So if we see it, okay, this 11 refers to SDG number 11. Okay, so SDG has 17 goals, kan? SDG 1 until 17. So this one is goal number 11, item number 1. So goal number 11 is to make cities inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. Okay, so there's 1, 2, 3, 4 keywords here. Inclusive, safe, resilient, sustainable. So target 1 is by 2030, ensure access for all to adequate, safe, and affordable housing and basic services, and upgrade slums. Okay, how? Or in what way? Target C, support the least developed countries, including through financial and technical assistance in building sustainable and resilient buildings, utilizing local materials. So this is the strategy. Okay, aim, objective, dia punya how to do that. Okay, action. Policies and measures to improve affordability of home ownership. Okay, I have less than 1 minute. I think it will end soon. Okay, anyway, policies and measures to improve affordability of home ownership. Subsidy policies to enable low-income households to rent or own adequate housing. Revenue and capital generating policies and mechanisms